What if I told you that a single word could cost you everything? Your freedom, your family, your life as you know it? This isn't a story from ancient history or a distant dystopia. This happened in our modern world, to a man whose only crime was refusing to betray what he believed in. His name became synonymous with courage, his story so powerful that Hollywood couldn't ignore it. But what you're about to discover will shock you more than any movie ever could. Because the real story behind this man's arrest reveals something terrifying about the world we live in today. Something that could happen to any of us. I remember the first time I heard about this case. I was scrolling through news articles, thinking I'd seen it all, when a headline stopped me cold. A pastor arrested not for what he did, but for what he refused to do. Not for committing a crime, but for refusing to commit what he saw as the ultimate betrayal. As I dug deeper, I realized this wasn't just another news story. This was a modern-day David versus Goliath, played out in courtrooms and prison cells. And the ending? Well, it's more incredible than fiction. The man at the center of this storm was Pastor Andrew Brunson. For 23 years, he had called Turkey his home, serving the small Christian community in the coastal city of Izmir. He wasn't a political activist or a revolutionary. He was simply a quiet man of faith who ran a small church, helped refugees, and lived peacefully with his wife Noreen and their 3 children. But sometimes, being ordinary in extraordinary circumstances makes you a target. And in 2016, everything changed. It started with a knock on the door. Turkish police arrived at the Brunson home on October 7th, ostensibly for a routine visa check. But routine quickly turned sinister. Within hours, Andrew found himself in handcuffs, accused of crimes that seemed to come from another universe. Terrorism. Espionage. Attempting to overthrow the government. The charges were so absurd they would have been laughable if they weren't so terrifying. Here was a man whose biggest threat to national security was organizing church potlucks. But here's what makes this story truly chilling. The real reason for his arrest wasn't hidden in some classified document, or whispered in back rooms. It was stated plainly by his interrogators. They wanted him to become a Muslim. They wanted him to deny his Christian faith. They offered him freedom, safety, a return to his family, all for the price of a single word. Yes. Yes, I'll convert. Yes, I'll abandon everything I believe. Yes, I'll betray the foundation of who I am. And Andrew Brunson looked them in the eye and said something that would cost him 2 years of his life. He said no. Such a simple word, yet it carried the weight of mountains. In that moment, Pastor Brunson made a choice that would echo through international corridors of power, spark diplomatic crises, and eventually land his story on the biggest screens in America. But behind the headlines and political negotiations was a human being, sitting in a Turkish prison cell, wondering if he'd ever see his family again. Wondering if standing firm in his beliefs was worth the price he was paying. The conditions of his imprisonment were designed to break him. Solitary confinement in a cell barely larger than a closet. Interrogation sessions that lasted for hours. Psychological pressure that would have crushed lesser men. His captors weren't just trying to punish him, they were trying to remake him. They believed that enough pressure, enough isolation, enough despair would eventually crack his resolve. They were convinced that every man has his breaking point. They were about to discover how wrong they could be. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, an unprecedented drama was unfolding. The arrest of one American pastor had triggered a diplomatic earthquake. President Trump imposed sanctions on Turkey. Economic pressure mounted. International headlines blazed with Brunson's name. But perhaps most remarkably, his story began to inspire millions of people who had never heard of Izmir or couldn't find Turkey on a map. Here was proof that faith still mattered, that some principles were worth suffering for, that courage wasn't extinct in our modern world. The breakthrough came in the most unexpected way. Not through diplomatic negotiations or prisoner exchanges, but through the quiet power of persistence. Brunson's story had captured the attention of Hollywood producer Devin Franklin, who saw in this modern persecution something that needed to be told. The film, Miracle in Lane 2, was already in development, But Franklin knew this story had the power to move hearts and change minds. What happened next would prove that sometimes, the most powerful revolutions happen not with weapons or protests, but with the simple act of refusing to surrender your soul. After 735 days in captivity, Andrew Brunson walked free. But his freedom came with a price that his captors never anticipated. His story had become larger than life, his courage had inspired millions, and his refusal to deny his faith had proven something profound about the human spirit. The film that followed wasn't just entertainment. It was a testament to the power of standing firm when everything around you demands that you fall. And today, as we face our own moments of pressure and compromise, Pastor Brunson's story reminds us that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on battlefields, but in the quiet chambers of our own hearts, where we decide who we really are when everything is on the line. Pastor Brunson's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable question: what are we willing to sacrifice for our deepest beliefs? In our daily lives, we face countless micro-moments where we're asked to compromise who we are. Maybe it's staying silent when a colleague makes a racist joke because speaking up might hurt our career prospects. Perhaps it's going along with unethical business practices because challenging them could cost us our job. Or it could be as simple as pretending to agree with popular opinions we disagree with just to fit in at social gatherings. These moments may seem insignificant compared to Brunson's imprisonment, but they reveal the same fundamental choice. Will we stand by our principles when it costs us something, or will we trade our integrity for comfort and acceptance? The most profound lesson from Brunson's ordeal isn't about religious faith alone. It's about the courage to remain authentic in a world that constantly pressures us to conform. Think about the teenager who refuses to participate in bullying despite facing social isolation. Consider the employee who reports workplace harassment knowing it might make their work environment hostile. Reflect on the parent who maintains their values even when other parents judge their parenting choices. These everyday heroes mirror Brunson's courage in smaller but equally meaningful ways. They understand that our character isn't defined by what we do when everyone is watching and approving, but by what we do when standing alone feels like standing against the world. The prison cell becomes our workplace, our classroom, our social circle, any place where we're tempted to betray ourselves for an easier path. What strikes me most about Brunson's story is how his refusal to compromise didn't just preserve his integrity. It became a beacon of hope for millions. This reveals something powerful about authentic living. When we courageously embrace who we are, we give others permission to do the same. Every time you choose honesty over popularity, principle over profit, or authenticity over approval, you create ripples that extend far beyond your immediate circle. The single mother who works 3 jobs while pursuing her education shows her children that dreams are worth fighting for. The small business owner who treats employees fairly despite competitive pressure demonstrates that success doesn't require sacrificing humanity. The friend who listens without judgment in our social media age of quick reactions shows that deep connection is still possible. These acts of authentic courage inspire others to live more boldly. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of Brunson's experience was the uncertainty, not knowing if his sacrifice would matter, if his family would be okay, if his suffering served any greater purpose. This mirrors our own struggles with faith in our choices. When we stand up for what's right, we rarely see immediate vindication. The whistleblower faces years of legal battles before justice prevails. The artist pursuing their passion endures countless rejections before breakthrough. The activist fighting for change sees progress measured in decades, not days. But Brunson's story reminds us that the impact of our courage often unfolds in ways we never anticipate. His faithfulness in a Turkish prison cell eventually moved world leaders, inspired millions, and became a Hollywood film. Your faithfulness in your circumstances, however small they may seem, has the potential to create changes you may never fully comprehend. The ultimate message of Pastor Brunson's journey isn't that we should seek out suffering or martyrdom, but that we should prepare ourselves for the moments when our values will be tested. These moments are inevitable. They come for all of us in different forms and at different times. The question isn't whether we'll face pressure to compromise, but whether we'll be ready when that pressure comes. Start small. Practice integrity in low-stakes situations so you're prepared for high-stakes ones. Surround yourself with people who support your authentic self. Clarify your non-negotiables before you're in the heat of the moment. Remember that every person who changed the world for the better faced the same choice Brunson faced: stay true to yourself or take the easier path. They chose truth over comfort, principle over convenience, and their courage echoes through history, reminding us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things simply by refusing to betray who they are. Thank you for staying with me through this incredible journey of courage and faith. Pastor Andrew Brunson's story isn't just history, it's a mirror reflecting our own capacity for extraordinary courage in ordinary moments. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it reminded you of the power we all possess to stand firm in our convictions, then please don't let it end here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and resilience. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of people committed to living authentically in an increasingly complex world. And most importantly, carry this story with you. The next time you face a moment where you're tempted to compromise who you are, remember Pastor Brunson in that prison cell, choosing faith over freedom, and ask yourself, what would courage look like in my situation? Your story of authentic living starts now. Make it count.